Welcome to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast with your host, astrologer and author, April Elliott Kent.
Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is November 24th, 2025. Welcome to episode 322 of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. It is another big week in the sky. As Mars squares the lunar nodes, prepared to move toward your future. Mercury makes a conjunction with Venus on a sort of whimsical Sabian symbol, and Venus trines Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn turns direct on Thanksgiving Day, and Mercury turns direct just a couple of days later. A Pisces last quarter moon could bring a crisis of faith, and Venus finishes her busy week and her time in Scorpio with an opposition to Uranus and a trine to Neptune before entering merry Sagittarius. And unfortunately, this is another week that is so crammed with aspects to talk about that once again there just isn't time for a listener question. But please do continue to send your questions for future episodes that are not quite so packed. Before we get started with this week's episode, I'd like to acknowledge a happy milestone, the 6th birthday of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Jen Brown and I published the first episode of the show on November 26, 2019, and this week I'm publishing the 322nd episode and beginning the podcast's 7th year. Thank you to everyone who has followed the show for all of these years, who have donated during the annual podathon, and who continue to share your questions and your good wishes for the podcast. It means everything. And now for this week's episode. Mars in Sagittarius squares the lunar nodes in Pisces and Virgo on Monday, November 24th at 5:32 a.m. Pacific Time. The north node of the moon represents one of the few can't-fail areas of the chart. The way my teacher described it was like this. She said, if you take any step in the direction of the north node, the direction of your fondest desires, in some way you will be rewarded. Now, the reward doesn't always come exactly in the form that you might have expected or hoped for, but it could be something that is fantastic that you had never imagined for yourself. Mars squaring this nodal axis is one that motivates us to step away from the south node, which is a more default setting. The south node currently is moving through the sign of Virgo. The whole time the South Node has been in Virgo, it has been trying to tell us to step away from negative qualities that we associate with Virgo, such as being overly critical, very perfectionistic, and focusing exclusively on what is practical and evident, instead of anything of the nature of Pisces, which takes things as they come and lets things unfold in the way that is natural for them, is not terribly critical, and also has some faith in what is unseen, instead of focusing almost exclusively on what we can see. So Mars this week is booting us out of the South Node safety net, encouraging us to release some of that Virgo perfectionism and moving ahead toward the things of faith. The North Node is on the Sabian symbol 15 Pisces, an officer preparing to drill his men. And Mars this week is definitely ready to march in the direction of our Pisces dreams. Also on Monday, November 24th at 5:52 p.m. Pacific Time, Mercury makes a conjunction with Venus at 22 degrees 45 minutes Scorpio. This lands on the Sabian symbol 23 Scorpio, a bunny metamorphosed into a fairy. In and of itself, a conjunction of Mercury and Venus would not necessarily raise thoughts of transformation. But this one happens in Scorpio, and where normally Mercury and Venus together would be how we ask for what we want, how we envision and conceptualize what would be valuable to us. And certainly this conjunction has elements of those things. But being in Scorpio and being on that particular Sabian symbol certainly brings an idea of transformation, of metamorphosis. Mercury in Scorpio is a pretty magical placement. It always makes me think of the magician card in tarot, where the magician is standing in front of a table with all of the tools of magic at his disposal. I think that Mercury in Scorpio has a little bit of that energy about it. So this one says, through the things that we love, the things that we care about, we can be guided to our metamorphosis. There are a couple of very busy days for Venus this week, and this is the first, Wednesday, November 26th, when Venus will trine Jupiter at 8:31 a.m. Pacific Time at 24 degrees 46 minutes Scorpio in Cancer, and when it will trine Saturn at 3:48 p.m. Pacific Time at 25 degrees 9 minutes Scorpio and Pisces. The trine of Venus to Jupiter brings together the two most lauded planets. They're often called the benefics. And when they come together, especially in an aspect like a trine, they often bring more pleasure and maybe even a little bit of luck. But in the case of this trine, Venus is on the Sabian symbol 25 Scorpio and X-ray. And it certainly speaks to looking deep within and really considering what pleasure and satisfaction would look like for you. Venus in Scorpio is a little bit complicated from that point of view. It's not necessarily geared towards seeking the kinds of things that another kind of person might consider pleasurable or satisfying. Venus's trine to Saturn is really connected with managing what you have more wisely. The Sabian symbol for Venus at this trine is 26 Scorpio, Indians making camp, and that's really a symbol of self-reliance. Sometimes the best thing that comes out of a Saturn transit to Venus is clarity about what it is that we need versus what we just think we want in the moment. And that's what these two trines together on November 26th suggest, in my opinion. Venus trine Jupiter finds it a little easier to get in touch with what we want. We don't always know. And then the trine to Saturn is, I think I have everything I need. I don't necessarily need to pursue more. What it is that is really necessary to me seems to be coming to me easily. And speaking of Saturn, on Thursday, November 27th at 7:51 p.m. Pacific Time, Saturn stations direct at 25 degrees 9 minutes Pisces. It went retrograde on July 12th at 1 degree 56 minutes Aries. As it turns direct, it is beginning the final few months of the last Saturn in Pisces period that we'll see for 29 years. While Saturn has been retrograde, it's been a time of looking within to find our own authority and the ways in which we need to be in charge of our own world. As it goes direct, it's time to show that to the world and also to work on emotional boundaries. We don't need them quite as much when Saturn's retrograde because we're focusing inward. But as Saturn goes direct, we might need to start being a little bit careful about who we let into our world, especially authority figures or people who think that they should be in a position to tell us what to do and what is right for us. The station happens on Sabian symbol 26 Pisces, a new moon that divides its influences. This is a symbol that describes a new beginning and one that requires us to take our own path apart from partners and close friends. And now it's time for the moon report. And we begin, as always, with the week's major lunation. This week, it's the Pisces First Quarter Moon on Thursday, November 27th at 10:59 p.m. Pacific Time at 6 degrees 17 minutes Sagittarius and Pisces. The first quarter moon is the moment in the lunar cycle when we first are asked to take action on something that we thought about at the new moon. In this case, that would have been the new moon in Scorpio on November 19th. What were we thinking about changing in our lives, transforming in ourselves and in our world at that new moon? When the first quarter moon comes along, we have an aspect of conflict between the sun and the moon. The moon has moved 90 degrees ahead of the sun, and it's time to take action on those intentions, those wishes, those new moon plans. We don't always know exactly what action would be appropriate to take. At the new moon, things are kind of dark, so we don't really always know where we're headed at the new moon. At the first quarter moon, there is more light, and we begin to see a little more clearly, but we may not exactly know what we're up to. At this particular first quarter moon, what do we need to act upon? Well, the sun is in Sagittarius, which symbolizes what we believe about the world. And the moon is in Pisces, which is also interested in how we see the world, but it has more of a dimension of faith in it. Sagittarius has a great deal of certainty about it, and Pisces is not about that. It is about what is the direction that feels right. What is the thing that is congruent with what I believe, whether or not I can back it up with rules or doctrine of any kind. So I suppose what I would say at this Pisces first quarter moon is, what are the actions that you feel you should take about something you were considering at the Scorpio new moon? And considering what it is that feels like the right thing to move forward on, now that a little time has passed. This is the first quarter in a lunar phase family cycle that began with the new moon on February 27th, 2025 at 9 degrees 40 minutes Pisces. What were you thinking of at that new moon? Look to the Pisces house of your chart and what it symbolizes. And you might get a clearer picture or memory of what you were contemplating at that time, because now is time to move forward on that. Let's say you had an artistic project that you had in mind. Pisces is associated with making art, with music, with painting, with dance. And perhaps there was something that you wanted to try in that realm. Well, now's the time to actually do something about it. And especially if it's something that you're a little nervous about, it can take a little while to gather the momentum and the courage to take a step in that direction. Now is the time. 9 months from now, there will be a full moon near this degree at 4 degrees 54 minutes Pisces. That's on August 27th, 2026. And at that time, perhaps there is even a little more clarity and awareness around this project in particular, or similar projects that you had in mind at the Pisces new moon. And then 9 months later, there's a last quarter moon near this degree at 7 degrees 1 minute Pisces on May 28th, 2027. I believe Dane Rudhyar referred to the last quarter moon phase as the crisis of confidence. It's when you've gone through 3/4 of the lunar cycle and you know a lot more than you did at the new moon, especially because you've been at it for a while and you might feel that you should know exactly what you're doing and what to do next. And we don't always, even at the last quarter moon. But at that last quarter moon, there at least is an opportunity to reassess, to take a look at how far you've come, and to consider the ways that you might wrap things up as you're going through that final 9 months of the lunar phase family cycle. Let's look at the void of course moon periods for this week. On Tuesday, November 25th, the moon in Capricorn sextiles Neptune at 1:10 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 1 hour and 5 minutes, and then enters Aquarius at 2:15 a.m. When the moon sextiles a planet as it's going retrograde, we know that there is an opportunity or an invitation that is coming our way. In this case, it is about the pragmatism and the organization and practicality of the moon in Capricorn, and how that can provide a strong structure for Neptune's intuition and inspiration. On Thursday, November 27th, the moon in Aquarius squares Uranus in Taurus at 9:53 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 1 hour, 31 minutes, and then enters Pisces at 11:24 a.m. There's a conflict often when the moon is square a planet as it goes void of course. What is the conflict here? On one hand, it feels as if the moon in Aquarius would have a certain amount in common with the planet Uranus. In fact, modern astrologers often consider Uranus the ruling planet of Aquarius. They are both about the ways in which we stand out, the ways in which we are different than the other people around us. And I think when the moon in Aquarius squares Uranus in Taurus, we're feeling uncomfortable about that, about the things that make us different, that make us stand out in a way that we don't always feel comfortable with. No matter how different and unconventional we consider ourselves to be, there are times when we'd still like to fit in. We would still like to find our people and be part of some kind of crowd. But at this void of course moon, I think the job before us really is to reassure ourselves that sometimes the places where we end up fitting in are the ones that appreciate how different we are. And on Saturday, November 29th, the moon in Pisces makes a conjunction with Neptune at 4:05 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course then for 1 hour and 2 minutes and enters Aries at 5:07 p.m. This is a good void of course time, a pretty short one, but a nice hour to find a way to disconnect from reality in healthy ways. Take a yoga class, do some meditation, take a contemplative stroll near water. Whatever it is that you can do to really go inside yourself, to really go within and see what it is that you find there. On Saturday, November 29th, Mercury stations direct at 9:38 a.m. Pacific time at 20 degrees 42 minutes Scorpio. It turned retrograde on November 9th at 6:51 Sagittarius. And since then, perhaps you've seen the usual array of Mercury retrograde problems: travel delays, miscommunications, problems with technology. Some feel that there is a retrograde residue that continues after Mercury turns direct until after its so-called shadow period ends. That's when Mercury reaches the degree where it first turned retrograde. And that will come on December 16th. I'm kind of a skeptic when it comes to Mercury retrograde. And it's because I think that there is a confirmation bias at work for us when Mercury is retrograde. We pay special attention when there is a problem with our computer or with our car or some kind of miscommunication. I personally feel that if we paid half as much attention to these things while Mercury is direct, we would find that we have just as many problems. During the next few months as Mercury is direct, I'm going to be keeping notes about when these kinds of things happen so that I can then compare when Mercury goes retrograde and decide if there really is something to this that I should be very concerned about or not. That may sound like heresy, and it might end up being that, yeah, there's a really good reason that we have all these problems when Mercury is retrograde. But I'm going to find out for myself. Also on Saturday, November 29th, Venus opposes Uranus at 6:48 p.m. Pacific Time at 29 degrees 5 minutes Scorpio and Taurus. When Venus is opposed Uranus, I think it's time to think about what are the societal rules and pressures that influence us to take a particular attitude toward Venus things, what we have, how we feel about money, even the kinds of people that we are told we should desire. Venus is on the Sabian symbol 30 Scorpio, Halloween jester. And I think those things are the Halloween jester at play, leading us down trails of desire that aren't necessarily true for us. I think this transit, Venus opposed Uranus, is about rejecting those influences and claiming our own freedom in Venus matters. It's not, I should make this amount of money. It's, what's the right amount of money for me that covers my expenses and a little bit more? Do I really need to seek a partner who has a particular kind of job or makes a certain salary? Or are there other qualities that are much more important to me? Uranus at this opposition is on a prosperity degree, 30 Taurus, peacock parading on an ancient lawn. That's not necessarily a picture that's absolutely true for us either. And this whole aspect is about getting a little bit of perspective and a little bit of clarity on what it is we really desire, that we value, that we want. That's a reflection of what's important to us, compared with external pictures of luxury and wealth and prosperity that might look nice, but don't really resonate for who we are. Venus trines Neptune on Sunday, November 30th at 12:48 a.m. Pacific Time at 29 degrees 24 minutes Scorpio and Pisces. Venus is at the very end of its sign of Scorpio, and before it moves on to Sagittarius, as it will the next day. I think this is a good aspect, a good day for releasing, letting go. That is something Neptune often encourages us to do. Let go of what drains your finances. What are the conflicts in certain relationships in our lives that leave us feeling drained after we spend some time with somebody? This is the kind of aspect that if all conditions are right, you could actually fall head over heels in love. And it could be with the wrong person or the wrong place or car, or you're in the market for buying a house and you see one and you fall completely in love with it. Be a little bit wary when that happens under a Venus-Neptune aspect, because the situation isn't always clear and your own desires are not necessarily clear either. Venus enters Sagittarius on Sunday, November 30th at 12:14 p.m. Pacific Time. It'll be in this sign through Christmas Eve. While Venus is in Sagittarius, we crave adventure and experiences that are completely novel for us. Often, we get interested in something of another culture. It is possible to have a Sagittarian experience even in your own neighborhood, as long as you're experiencing something that you haven't before. Sagittarius is also a very outdoorsy and sporty sign. While Venus is in Sagittarius, I think we find particular enjoyment in the outdoors, just taking a hike, going to the park, and getting out and having a long walk. Or if you do like sports, it's a fun time for throwing a party, a tailgate party at a football game, or just having a bunch of friends over to watch a game. All of these are things that really awaken the Sagittarius side of us. It is also a sign that is somewhat associated with religion or beliefs. And here is an example. I'm not a particularly religious person, but during Sagittarius season, I am going to go to a Christmas choral concert at a church in a nearby neighborhood. And that is a way, I think, of combining music, Venus, the arts, with the sacred. And it is a sign that really likes to enjoy the natural world. Depending on where you live, the weather might not be as completely hospitable for outdoor activities as it might be other times of year, but there is great beauty even in cold and blustery weather. As I said at the beginning of this episode, unfortunately, because we had another week with so many aspects I wanted to cover at least a little bit, it didn't leave a lot of time this week for a listener question. And I think this is the third week in a row that has been the case. I'm sure hoping to get back to them soon. So please do continue to send your questions if you would like them answered on a future episode of the podcast. You can leave a message of 1 minute or less at speakpipe.com/Big Sky Astrology Podcast, or just send an email to me at april@bigskyAstrology.com, and be sure you put podcast question in the subject line. Well, that is everything on my show sheet, so I am going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, I hope that you will subscribe or follow the show in your app of choice. It really does help other people find the podcast. Leave a rating or a review, and I hope you will help spread the word by telling an astrology-loving friend about the podcast. You can read show notes and full transcripts and leave your comments about each episode at bigskyastropod.com. Many thanks to everyone who has continued to show support for the podcast over the last 6 years, and in particular during my recent podathon. On each episode, I'm thanking some of my financial donors by name. This week, let's give a Big Sky Astrology Podcast shout out to new donor Lindsay Langford and Rachel Fletcher, who has donated to every single podathon. Rachel and Lindsay, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for supporting the show with your donations. If you would like to support the show and receive access to my bonus video episodes for donors only, we've been having them around the time of each new moon. Please go to bigskyastropod.com and make a contribution of $10 or more. You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become an ongoing monthly contributor. That is it for this episode. Join me again bright and early next Monday. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about April Elliott Kent, visit her website, bigskyAstrology.com, where you can sign up for her newsletter, read her thoughtful essays, find out more about her books and classes, or book a personal astrology reading. That's all for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to follow or subscribe to stay current with new episodes. And please leave a rating or review. You can follow Big Sky Astrology on Facebook or Twitter and Big Sky Astrology April on Instagram. Thanks again for being here, and we hope you'll join us next time.